my pleasure and my honour to host an event in Parliament where our friends from Hezbollah will be speaking.
I think there is a bias towards saying that Israel is a democracy in the Middle East, Israel has a right to exist, Israel has its security concerns.
This anti-Zionist anti-Semitism was the new anti-Semitism, and it wasn't very long before you got back to all the same old tropes and hatreds and prejudice and lies. They were spreading a culture of hate towards Jews. I can't be part of that.
This prominent Labour Party member, by calling for a march on the local synagogue in Brighton and Hove, shows an absolute illustration of the kind of worldview that they have, in that the whole of the Jewish community is linked to Israel, that it's some whole conspiracy against them, and that the suspension of one of the candidates for saying something anti-Semitic was somehow engineered by the Jewish community.
Every time the Labour Party, senior ranking people in the Labour Party called the Jewish community Trump fanatics, for example, and Trump supporters, I would have a sense of doom.
I was asking the UN to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and after I did my speech, I left the hall and a British civil servant came up to me, almost quite aggressively, and said to me how ashamed he was of me, that I'd lied, that I was making up accusations of anti-Semitism, that the British ambassador would be ashamed of me, that I don't represent Britain.
I left the Labour Party because I was appalled at the anti-Semitism that has developed, the extremism and anti-Semitism that I think has poisoned the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. I didn't leave to walk away from the fight or to run away. I left to shine a spotlight on what's happening and to demand that other people step up and sort of fight against this.
Dear Miss Formby, it is with sincere regret that I write to you today to resign my membership of the Labour Party.
I joined the Labour Party in 1993.
Dear Peter,
having been persuaded
it is with regret and some relief that I am today resigning from the Labour Party.
Resigned from the Labour Party. I have been a member for 55 years.
I'm David Hirsch. I'm a lecturer at Goldsmiths, University of London. I resigned from the Labour Party when remaining a member became unbearable. This film is about people who've had to leave the Labour Party because of anti-Semitism. They resigned, but really it was constructive dismissal. They were forced out by the politics and culture of anti-Semitism, which became normal in the party. Warren Morgan wasn't just a member of the Labour Party in Brighton, he was the leader of the Labour Council.
It was always a pleasure for Labour Conference to come to Brighton and Hove in the 25 years that I was a member. But in the past 4 years, it's become a nightmare with the kind of racism and anti-Semitism that we've seen.
At the 2017 Labour Conference, a leaflet was circulated demanding the expulsion of the Jewish Labour movement. Another quoted Nazi propaganda to make a point against Labour Jews, and Holocaust denial was defended as part of legitimate debate. Jewish MP Luciana Berger was so harassed that the following year she needed police protection. Warren wrote to Labour's General Secretary saying that if nothing was done about anti-Semitism, then Labour couldn't meet in the council-run conference centre again.
My view had always been that the Labour Party was an anti-racist party, and that applied to anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial as well. Not only was it morally wrong in my view, but it was wrong in all of the policies that we stood for as a council, as a Labour council. So I knew that I had to do something. Very quickly, the reaction from party officers, from other people in the party across Brighton and Hove, was that I was fabricating this, that there was no evidence of it, and that I was weaponising it to attack the left of the party. There were motions circulated around all of the branches in the city which basically called on me to withdraw the whole thing that I'd put through, apologise for it, or stand down as leader. And the whole thing was to get me to admit that I'd made it all up.
Hostility to Warren spread fast in the local party. A cartoon depicting him as a dancing rabbi was circulated by Labour members, and police advised him to install security at his own home. He was uninvited to meetings discussing disciplinary action against him, and when he attended anyway, people claimed that his presence was intimidating.
It was just a good 30 minutes of, you've made all this up, this is just an attack, this is factionalism, this is something that isn't motivated by any kind of anti-racist thing. This is purely factional attacks on Jeremy. Dear Miss Formby, as for so many long-serving members and councillors, it's been made clear to me on many occasions by people who largely joined in 2015, often from other left-wing parties, that I'm no longer welcome. Indeed, it's been argued that I was never real Labour at all. It was made clear that I should stand down as council leader and would not win re-selection.
Anti-Semitism is aggression against Jews, but it always portrays itself as the victim of the Jews. So when Warren spoke out, though he himself wasn't Jewish, he was seen as somebody siding with the powerful and the enemies of the Labour Party. It is the whistleblower who is attacked and the anti-Semitism which gets protected.
Obviously, it was a huge privilege to be elected leader of the City Council, the place that I'd grown up in. We nearly doubled the number of our seats under my leadership, and we set out to do some very ambitious things. It's very hard when political campaigning has been your entire life, without a sort of professional career, to then go to nothing.
The Labour Party to me is the party concerned with social justice, which is what I've been concerned with all my life, and that is why I became a member of it. I've raised the issue of anti-Semitism in the CLP and amongst Labour elected members. They do not want to know.
I'm inviting you all to reflect on whether it is appropriate and consistent with Hastings Borough Council values that a Labour councillor should be running with
No, once again, please sit down. You can't go on. What you're actually putting forward is your own idea, nobody else. Well, at least I hope nobody else.
The first time I raised it in this CLP, in response to constant anti-Israel motions, I was shut up, basically. I was put down by the then chair, and it was closed.
The Secretary of Jewish Voice for Labour, of which Councillor Levan...
No, sorry, Councillor, you can't go on, you can't bandstand yet.
I wrote to the leader of the council, who said in full council that anti-Semitism is not an issue here in Hastings, telling him exactly how and why it is an issue, and he responded to me by saying my letter had been accusatory and unpleasant, and he didn't engage with the content. People who don't have a Jewish community in their towns quite easily have never met Jews before. They don't know anything about the culture. It's demonstrably true that they are not recognising anti-Semitism when they see it. I asked the leader of the council if all the elected members could have anti-Semitism training. He kind of agreed, but then he wouldn't pursue it.
As a councillor in Hastings, Danny Louise soon learned that speaking up about Labour's anti-Semitism made her colleagues feel threatened.
It feels as if I am being delegitimised rather than people with the opposing view. It feels as though somehow I have become the problem, that I am the betrayer, that in some way I am the enemy of Labour by bringing it to their notice.
I've been opposing anti-Semitism since I was a student in the 1980s. People said Zionism was racism and Jewish societies were Zionist, and therefore, they said, our Jewish societies should be prohibited from campus. In 2003, this same hostility returned when I was in the academics trade union. There was a campaign for a boycott of Israel, which meant that Israelis should be prohibited from our campuses here in Britain, and anyone who spoke out like I did was cast as being racist. There would never be a campaign to exclude the academics of any other country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good, well-funded public services are the lifeblood of a decent society.
Louise Ellman said that she never wanted to be a Jewish MP, she wanted to be a Labour MP. I never wanted to be a Jewish sociologist, I wanted to be a sociologist. But opposing anti-Semitism has you constructed from outside and in a hostile way as somebody who's working for a foreign power.
I became leader of Lancashire County Council in 1981, a very difficult time, mass unemployment, a government that just didn't care about the North, and I was one of many other people who worked with businesses, with other people to see what we could actually do to bring jobs and to restore some prosperity to the areas we represented. It wasn't done by slogans, it was done by action.
But in 2019, she was forced out of the Labour Party as a Zionist by people who said she was a racist and not a proper socialist and not fit to be in the party.
It's absolutely appalling to be treated as a racist, and it's something I could never have contemplated would happen in the Labour Party. One of the reasons I joined the Labour Party was its anti-racist stance. That's what the Labour Party is all about. And I've spent most of my adult life fighting racism of all sorts.
The worldview that now rules in Labour has a special place for Israel. It makes it central to and symbolic of everything that is bad in the world. This is anti-Semitism.
You go to local meetings, and in my case, you have obsessive questioning all about Israel and Palestine, and the people at those meetings only want to know about that. They're not interested in what you're doing about the health service, about jobs, about housing. They're absolutely obsessed with their real hatred of Israel. I have been a member for 55 years and the public representative in local and central government continuously since 1970. My decision has been truly agonising, as it has been for thousands of other party members who have already left. I will not join any other party. I hope that under different leadership I will be able to return to my political home.
In 2016, Shami Chakrabarty's investigation of Labour anti-Semitism was condemned as a whitewash by the Board of Deputies of British Jews.
Do you have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
Do I have political ambitions in the Labour Party?
Do you want to run as an MP?
I don't know, probably not, but I don't know.
Okay. If you were offered a place in the House of Lords, would you take it?
Goodness me,
Just a general question.
I don't know.
Have you been offered a place?
I don't know whether I want to talk about my future ambitions at this point.
Parry Mitchell, a member of the House of Lords, resigned on the day of its publication.
They will brook no dissent whatsoever. So any member of Parliament, any shadow minister, whoever it happens to be, who voices a different opinion, becomes the enemy. And they use a multitude of weapons against them, including social media, including making sure that the membership of their local committees do everything they can to deselect them. It's the environment and the rules and the whole everything associated with it. I am saying to myself, I don't want to be part of this party anymore. I'm out. I have been pushed out of my home. How can I, a Jew and a Zionist, remain in a party where the leadership is so hostile to Israel, even to its very existence, and which also flirts with anti-Semitism? In the end, it was an easy decision, but that makes it nonetheless painful.
I cannot remain a member of the Labour Party while its leadership allows Jews to be abused with impunity. and the victims of such abuse to be ridiculed, have their motives questioned, and their integrity called into doubt.
Joan Ryan took anti-Semitism seriously. She educated herself to understand it, and she campaigned against it.
I'm not Jewish. Anti-Semitism isn't just a problem for Jews, it's racism. I was born in Warrington in the northwest into a very working class Irish community, but a lot of people who came from Ireland of my mum and dad's generation, they'd come from hard times, from poverty, and they had hard times when they got here, and they faced a lot of discrimination. And I think the underlying principle on which the Labour Party rests, on which it developed, is equality. And I think it was a party of openness and optimism and hope. And they have destroyed that.
Here is one example out of hundreds of hate mail received by Joan Ryan. This letter was slipped under her office door in Parliament by somebody who had full security clearance. In the spring of 2018, there was an unprecedented demonstration by British Jews against Labour anti-Semitism. That summer, Labour was stubbornly reluctant to adopt the definition of anti-Semitism promoted by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, known as IRA. This definition warns that some of the things Corbyn and his allies wanted to legitimise may be anti-Semitic. At the 2018 conference, there was a Brexit debate, and the party spin doctors were very careful to make sure there were no European Union flags visible on conference floor. The same day, there was what is euphemistically called a Middle East debate, and suddenly, from nowhere, literally hundreds of Palestinian flags appeared.
I think at that moment, when all the flags appeared and in the midst of that difficult debate, I think the Palestinian flag was being used by Labour Party delegates as a weapon against Jewish people, against Israel. How can that possibly help to build peace? It can't. There's nothing in that action that signalled conflict resolution values.
In the context of relentless anti-Semitism and its routine denial, this became a classic political dog whistle. If you're attuned to the frequency, you know that it's Jew baiting. But if you're not, it can look completely innocent.
This anti-Zionist anti-Semitism is a symbol of those hard left politics that have taken over the Labour Party. People very, very close to Jeremy, as we know, only left the Communist Party in very recent times, the SWP, the WRP, Tusk, all these people who've been absolutely committed to these kind of extremist, cultist, bullying, hard left politics for so long. And Israel is like a very quick shorthand of identifying those politics. They see it as Israel is both a perpetrator in its own right of capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, and a puppet of America.
I learnt important values growing up in Dudley. The importance of fairness and playing by the rules. Knowing what's right and what's wrong. Basic, decent British values. I grew up listening to my dad, a refugee from the Holocaust, teaching me about the evils of hatred and prejudice. One of the main reasons I joined the Labour Party as a teenager here in Dudley more than 35 years ago was to fight racism, and I could never have believed that I'd be leaving because of racism too. The Labour Party has been my life, so this has been the hardest decision I've ever had to take. But I have to be honest, and the truth is that I've become ashamed of the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn.
So it's going to be only friends from Hezbollah. So far as I'm concerned, that is absolutely the right function of using parliamentary facilities to invite people from other parts of the world.
I wrote articles about how he's described Hamas and Hezbollah as his friends, how he'd associated with people like Stephen Sizer, how he'd taken money from Press TV, the official state broadcaster of the Iranian dictatorship.
I suspect the hand of Israel in this whole process.
I was against him being leader of the Labour Party because of all this stuff. It's not, I'm against him being the leader of the Labour Party, and so I reached for this stuff. This is why I think he spent 30, 40 years, his entire time in politics, working with all sorts of extremists and anti-Semites.
Ian Austin told us about a demonstration against Israel which was held outside his constituency surgery in Dudley.
They were sort of outside the community centre, so loud on megaphones that you couldn't really hear what people were trying to tell you in the advice session itself. And I went out and said, look, I'm happy to talk to you, you can come in and talk to me, ask me any questions. They didn't want to do that. They sort of carried on shouting at me over the megaphone. Yeah, and one of them said that I was paid by the Zionists to help the Jews over there. Look, I'm routinely being accused of being in the pay of Mossad or being paid by the Israelis. And I'm told that the reason I criticise Jeremy Corbyn is because I'm working with Israeli billionaires.
With such bullying allegations of bad faith come an implicit threat of violence. Ian Austin told us about a local party member who had been publishing threats on Twitter under a pseudonym.
And it was a clear reference to violence. And this building, doesn't just contain my office, it contains a women's aid centre. So we had no choice on this one but to raise it with the police. Look, someone like this shouldn't be a member of the Labour Party. And it took months and months and months, before they dealt with it. And they found every excuse not to, refused to engage with the complaint because we'd made a spelling mistake in one of the letters. The reason the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn is not dealing with these things is not because it's difficult, it's because they don't want to.
There are those who will say it's not as bad as people are saying, or there were those who would say it was a smear. But week after week, as each incident happened, as Corbyn refused to deal with it, would suspend people for the most minor and ridiculous things, but people who said something absolutely beyond the pale, clearly racist, as long as it was also anti-Semitic, nothing was really happening very much. Or they were in this revolving door, they'd be suspended, the dust would settle and quietly the door would come back round and come out the other side and they'd be back as members.
Labour anti-Semitism isn't just the nastiness of random individuals. The leadership faction itself embraces a political anti-Semitism which sees Israel as a unique evil and which focuses attention on the Jews who are said to support it. The party machine creates a safe space for anti-Semitism, and many activists then feel licensed to bully. For Hannah Rose, membership of the Labour Party became untenable, both for her personally and as the president of the Union of Jewish Students.
Riddled with anti-Semitism. I resigned from the Labour Party in September 2018 after the re-election of Pete Wilsman to the NEC. And that was really because it had been revealed beforehand that he'd made some comments that the vast majority of the Jewish community recognised to be anti-Semitic. And he got elected anyway.
They're Trump fanatics and all the rest of it. So I'm not going to be lectured to by Trump fanatics making up daft information without any evidence at all. So I think we should ask the 70 rabbis, where is your evidence of severe and widespread anti-Semitism in this party?
And it just proved to me that the membership don't care. And that's really when it clicked with me that this is an institutional problem, because this guy is now part of the decision-making process for the Labour Party. And at all levels, if I wanted to make a complaint against an individual who I thought was anti-Semitic, no one would care. It became clear to me that being a member of the Labour Party was not compatible with my Jewish values anymore. And it's the same thing that a lot of people who've left the Labour Party have said. It's not me or my values that changed, it's the party that changed. And it wasn't something that I could go onto campus and strike up a conversation with a Jewish student about and feel like I could justify. I absolutely feel like I was pushed out by anti-Semitism. I said in my resignation letter, I came to fight for social justice and help refugees and asylum seekers in this country. And it became clear to me that that wasn't what was happening in the Labour Party anymore. And they would rather bicker over factional politics and anti-Semitism and deny it than actually help people who need our help. The Jewish community stands united in opposition to anti-Semitism. It does not stand in opposition to one political leader or one political party.
Literally thousands of examples of Labour anti-Semitism have been meticulously documented, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission is currently investigating them. The only party that they've investigated before is the fascist BNP. But the Labour Party still thinks of itself as the community of the good.
These people and the people around them are a million miles away from the traditional, mainstream, decent politics of the Labour Party. They have poisoned what was once a great party with extremism. They cannot be trusted with the institutions that underpin our democracy. They are completely unfit to lead the Labour Party, let alone our country.
The level of denial by Jeremy Corbyn supporters leaves me in despair. People should be holding their hands up in horror when the victims tell them they are being anti-Semitic. People and institutions who are sincere about not being racist learn to change their attitudes, their behaviour and their procedures for the better.
Jeremy Corbyn, who has spent 3 decades on the backbenches, consorting with and never confronting anti-Semites, Holocaust deniers and terrorists, has attracted the support of too many anti-Semites. The Labour Party is no longer a safe place for Jews, and Jeremy Corbyn must bear the responsibility for this. We cannot allow him to do to the country what he has done to the Labour Party.
In this Labour Party, charges of anti-Semitism are denied and reflected back onto the person who makes them.
People say, oh, look, they're just trying to curtail debate about Israel and Palestine. But it's way, way beyond that. And a lot of this stuff, this current crisis blew up because Jeremy Corbyn had defended a grotesque racist mural that depicted powerful and wealthy Jewish people playing Monopoly on the backs of the poor. A grotesque racist image on a wall in East London. That had nothing to do with Israel at all. Or Ken Livingstone's bizarre rantings about Adolf Hitler and the Zionists.
What I said was that in the 1930s, Hitler supported Zionism. But if I said Hitler was a Zionist, I wouldn't have just apologise. I'd ask my doctor if it wasn't the first sign of dementia.
Rewriting history, you're a disgusting racist. You're saying it's not true?
But he did a deal with the Zionists, and I didn't even criticise the deal. It led to 66,000 German Jews being moved to Palestine, and therefore they avoided death in the gas chambers. The SS set up training camps because there's no evidence that I said anything that was anti-Semitic.
You're a disgusting Nazi apologist, Livingstone.
This is all whipped up, basically to try and undermine Jeremy Corbyn.
Some of this stuff has got nothing to do with Israel whatsoever, but even a lot of what I think for some people are sort of legitimate concerns about the plight of the Palestinians, concerns I share. I want to see a Palestinian state, but I think it's tipped way beyond that for a lot of people into anti-Semitism. I think a lot of young people who know nothing about Israel, nothing about the Middle East, couldn't find Israel on a map, some of them I think, have joined the Labour Party. They think Jeremy Corbyn's this really nice, virtuous guy. And so these criticisms of him, they've got to be untrue. It must be a plot and a smear and a conspiracy. And I think they get dragged into saying things and to believing things that are completely unacceptable. And I think that is the really terrible thing that's happened. Poisoning young people, I think, is just unforgivable. Unforgivable.
It's given me a perspective into the worldview, the political view of the far left, who see Jewish people as privileged, as part of the global capitalist system. They don't see that treating one group of people who are linked by their ethnicity as the same as the EDL coming to Brighton and abusing women in hijabs, or indeed people coming to the city and engaging in homophobic abuse against our sizable LGBT community. I think they see it as sort of justifiable because of the Israel-Palestine conflict. There's this whole kind of global conspiracy to maintain status quo, which, if there's one thing we've heard from the 2019 conference, is, we are about changing the capitalist system, and they have a racist view of the role of Jewish people within that.
The people in this film suffered serious consequences for speaking out. They started as valued leaders in their party. They ended up being treated as outcasts. Anti-Semitism is an anti-democratic system of thinking about everything. People look to Labour for protection and justice, but a party polluted by anti-Semitism cannot provide either.
I think for all of us who left, it's a very difficult decision to make, because you have to reckon that there's no going back. We're not any of us fools. I knew very clearly that this could be, people said to me, you've probably given up your political career. You've got to go back to the reasons you're in that party. It is because of those values and principles. And if it not only can it not be true to them, but they've eradicated those values, then you either have to give up your values to stay in it, or you make the decision to leave. As I say, for quite some time I tried to fight it from within, but in the end, you're fighting on ground you've already lost. You're fighting yourself if you stay in. And I couldn't give up my values, and I no longer believed there was any evidence at all that you could win the fight from inside. So in many ways, as anguished and hard a decision as it was to make, I've never felt I made the wrong decision. I've never regretted it. And the minute I'd made the decision and gone public, it then was the easiest thing.
I devoted pretty much 20 years full time to the Labour Party, giving up my job, working all hours at the expense of family life and my career to make it succeed, to elect local councillors, to elect a Labour MP in Brighton Kemp Town. And it's difficult now to feel like, to have been demonised by the party, and for them to say you never belonged in it, you shouldn't be in it, you should leave.
The Labour Party has been the longest association, apart from my parents, in my life. And I was proud to be a member of the Labour Party. I mean, I joined as a teenager, I was an activist, a volunteer, I was a local councillor here in Dudley, I worked for the party. I worked as an advisor in the last Labour government with Gordon Brown. I was a government minister. I was always proud to be a member of the Labour Party. I loved the Labour Party. It was part of who I was, a big part of my life. So I can't believe that things have deteriorated. The party's been poisoned to the extent that people like me, and many others, have ended up leaving.
It is very upsetting what's happened to the Labour Party. It's very distressing. And I think I know from talking to constituents and groups actually around the whole country that millions of people feel they've no political home.
At the time, I was so frustrated, and I still am, because young people like me, and I know a lot of people in my situation, we have so much energy, we have so much passion for the issues that we care about, and there is nowhere to put that energy. And I think the country is losing out, because all these young people who really care and want to progress society have nowhere to go, no political home. There's nothing for us to do. And so what do we do now?
You've heard from just a few witnesses who fought hard against anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but ultimately were forced to leave. There's also a book containing many more resignation letters. Anti-Semitism isn't just about the Jews. It's an indicator of a deep malaise at the heart of our democratic system. Thank you to all who continue the fight.